And we're live with our 165th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode. We've got a lot to talk about today. The biggest thing is that both Ken and I hate daylight savings time, right? We came to that conclusion before going live because why, I guess, right? Like we've decided we're going to shift and actually do the hour jump ahead on Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. instead of Sunday at 2 a.m. Just because, right?
2 a.m. on a weekend was the worst idea ever. That's terrible. Let's do it on
I don't know. That's what happens when we let Congress run things, Ken. Is that
yeah. Well, it's funny. So my son asked, he goes like, "Oh, is that, the whole world, or is that?" And we're like, "Well, wait, I don't actually know." So we looked it up, and it's like 70 plus countries that actually adhere to daylight savings time. Yeah. But anyways, I don't understand it anymore. I mean, everybody stays up late anyways. Y'all have Netflix and Hulu and all that stuff, this isn't like it's not really, I don't think it's impacting. I mean, I don't know. What do I know? I'm not the daylight savings expert, but yeah, sucks. I know that much. Makes me tired, very tired. Yep. I'm drinking like so much more coffee this week just to keep going.
Well, and that's always the problem, right? The spring forward, right? Like when you jump an hour forward, you've got to go to bed earlier, but your body's not used to it. Like the adjustment period is what kills me both ways. I'm like, man, +1 for moving to Arizona just so I don't have to deal with this crap twice a year. You know what I mean?
I think Hawaii
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
They just think we're ridiculous, right, for handling any of it. But I don't know. And then you think about the amount of money that we spend on that from a technology perspective as well, right?
Oh yeah.
Having to adjust clocks forward and back. I mean, we already deal with time zones, but then like depending when it is, that time may change from 9 a.m. to 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. I don't know, whatever, right? Like, okay, so we don't shift 12 hours, but whatever. You get the idea. So
I'll say this was the first time where I was like, because normally I'm pretty anti just new things in general, but especially like with smart devices. But like we have a couple smart devices in the house, and it was nice. That was the one nice benefit, is they're connected to some server that then updates their clock. So it's like, for once, I didn't have to change the oven clock, for instance. That's nice. It's like the only like decent benefit I'm seeing out of those things. Otherwise, it's
well, just leave them on, because we use that to keep track of you, Ken. Don't worry about it.
Okay, perfect. You want to know about No,
I like to know, what temperature you're cooking your, your bakes on. I don't know, whatever, right?
Yeah. No, everything else is like I'm having to manually adjust a bunch of stuff, and it's just annoying all around. Yep. So I think we can agree on that.
Yes. Hopefully. And apparently this is the Bitch Today podcast. So
it's always the Bitch Today podcast. That's what we do, man. That's what I'm good at. It's like my number one talent.
Woohoo! But along those lines, jumping away from bitching, we will be in Omaha in a couple of weeks for KernelCon. If you haven't heard, we are teaching the code review course, and there are a couple of seats still available. So if you have been looking for an opportunity to join up and take that course, this is a good place to do it, and to also support KernelCon. And in addition to that, LocoMocoSec, we will be teaching the course at LocoMocoSec as well.
Yeah, and there's going to be a decent turnout, I think. I think like we're like our teams at GitHub, we're looking at it pretty intensely for our first, kind of group get together. So there might be quite a few of us there as well. So I'm excited all around. Like, it's never a bad idea, never bad to go to Hawaii, but let alone to like go see people you haven't seen in a long time in person. That's like, just for me, that's huge. I'm sure for a lot of people that's huge.
Yeah.
Just feeling some sense of normalcy back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. Very cathartic.
It totally is. And if you're interested in knowing what those trainings are like, we did post a video within the last couple of weeks, Ken doing the walkthrough of the Vulnerable Task Manager on our YouTube channel, on AppSec's YouTube channel. You can go ahead and check that out. It's a longer, we've cut it up a little bit, but it's a longer, like hour-long video that kind of walks through the process of what we teach. But the hands-on training, obviously, what you get out of it is repetition, and we teach you can ask questions, all sorts of things. So please come if you're interested. We'd love to have you. I'd love to talk about source code review. Speaking of which, we did have an Apps After Dark episode last week. We didn't promote it very much, but we did kick off another review. Right? Maybe I should pull some of these up.
I was actually going to ask you about that. Like I was thinking about that today, getting your kind of opinion on what we were able to dig into with Rocket, like what, you thought of the framework, what you thought of doing a review on Rust, the language itself. Yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, because we never really got a chance to, after that episode, how we were both fried. It was late at night, and we haven't really gotten a chance to catch up since then. So I definitely was curious to hear your thoughts about everything and how it all kind of went down.
Yeah, and I haven't actually posted the notes from that yet either, right? It was interesting, right? It was a lot more complex, right? Like I felt like we had to do a lot more background on it in that couple of hours. And for those that missed it, we were looking at a Rust Rocket application, right? So Rocket is a Rust web framework. It seems very similar to Express or Flask, right, for Python, Node Express. But it's not quite as opinionated as Rails or some of the other frameworks that we look at. But where Ken and I are both pretty much Rust newbies, right? Like we haven't done a lot in Rust. I mean, we're able to read it. It's fairly easy to read it's an interpreted language, I believe. Yeah. But it gave us, I don't know, right? Like there was a lot of kind of, I don't know. You're asking me this question. I don't have a good formulated opinion on it, right? It felt useful to me. I came away knowing a lot more about Rocket, about how Rust applications, are laid out. But I didn't feel like we discovered anything that groundbreaking, to be honest with you, right? I mean, last time it was PHP, and PHP is a dumpster fire. We all know that. But this time around, I think it was a lot more true to life as far as what I do on a daily basis from a code review perspective, because in 2 hours, I didn't really get into the vulnerabilities. We got into a lot of what are the basics of the language, what are the patterns and anti-patterns that we should be recognizing, what are some of the interesting endpoints, how do we identify routes. It was all very useful, but it wasn't groundbreaking, I guess, is where I'm at with it. What about you? What were your thoughts?
So I was actually curious to look up first your comment about it being possibly interpreted. And it's weird. It looks and behaves somewhat like an interpreted language, but they call it a statically typed compiled language. But yeah, I felt very like there were meta programming aspects to it. So I agree with you, like in the way that it felt. And I was trying to clarify that myself, because I was actually curious. We never really dug too deep into the language itself. It was, primarily so like for people that don't know, when we look at the language, we're looking for specific types of behavior and nuances, how it does it access like system commands, for instance, things like that. So those are usually where, if we're doing a review and we've never looked at a language, we'll kind of dig in there. And of course, there's obviously things where, you get into like some function call and you're like, wait, I need clarification on how this is behaving, stuff like that. Sure. But we're not like trying to go deep into the language. We're curious more about the framework. So that, to answer your question, Yeah. So I thought the ranked index was dicey on routing. That was interesting to me. I thought like that could really lead to a lot of problems in the future. So that was the first thing that kind of stuck out to me. It did have a lot of like configuration files for security things. So clearly security had been thought of. There was CSERV, content security policy, those types of things that are configurable via config files. I think it was structurally, I've looked at a few Rocket apps now after having seen that one and just like not really looked, but like just looked at their structure at a high level. And they all seem to be structured pretty much the similar way. So it's somewhat opinionated, I think, in structure. I was surprised there was a web framework for Rust because, from my understanding, Rust was more like Golang and that it's supposed to be like a performant backend type thing was what I thought. So to see a web framework that was fairly robust built out was surprising. We didn't get to dig too far into the ORM, so I actually am curious about like more around the ORM and the authorization stuff was the one that really seemed a little like more than a little suspect. Yeah. I mean, that's super strange how it happens. And the fact that, one thing I'd like to clarify is if, an error occurs during authorization, does it then send that request on to the next ranked route, which would be
yeah, exactly. That's where I was
incredibly problematic.
Yeah, was the ranked routing stuff. Yeah, that you're calling out was super interesting. And if people listening have questions about it, feel free to jump into Slack or watch the episode and then we can talk about it. But basically there's a failover system for routing built into this Rust Rocket framework. So anything that's rank 1 gets served up first. But based on whether or not that matches, right, like the path parameters or whatever else, it can actually fail into a second rank or a third rank or a rank 10, right? Like something behind the scenes. It's almost like a fail open to a 404 error, right? And yeah, there's all sorts of questions that both you and I have around that. That the next After Dark episode, I'm sure we'll dig into more. It may be interesting at some point to put together a vulnerable, Rust application and play with it as well, right? Just because it's an interesting case that we haven't seen before. But the authorization going along with that feels just so problematic.
It does.
It really does. Decorators and yeah, if you can get something to hit that lower ranked or the secondary or the failed page and give you access to one of the higher ranked ones. I don't know, Ray. Like there's got to be a way around it, I'm sure.
It might be my least favorite way to define routes, because that whole failover is like, oh, if you have like the one example they use to explain rank is like if you had /users/email or /users/UUID and you send in an email value and maybe like the UUID one's ranked first, and you sent in an email value and it tries to convert that string parameter in the URL you submitted to like parse it on into like some integer value or whatever, or just whatever specific formatting that's not a string and is the UUID. And if that fails, then it's like, oh, you actually probably meant to send it to the /users/email endpoint. So let me forward that on. Like having multiple patterns that a request could match makes little to no sense to me. I don't like that. I want to be very strict in my route. I want to know exactly where a request is going to hit and know that it's only going to hit that one route and not another route. There for so many reasons, but that I got to be honest with you, that's the thing I like the least about Rocket so far is just how they do that. I think, and out of all the frameworks I've reviewed, that might be one of the worst, in my opinion, ways to have to define a route. But anyways, maybe there's some coolness I'm missing and something it gives you that I'm totally missing, and maybe that's just genius beyond my level of comprehension. But
that must be it.
That must be it. Because at first glance, it looks like, wow, this is madness. I don't like this at all. Anyways. Because weird things happen, man. You can't make this. What is the one principle we know about coding and web security or just security issues in general when it comes to code. Too much flexibility equals probably a vulnerability. Always.
Yep.
Like you overload a function's purpose, probably going to be vulnerable. You overcomplicate things and don't define, hard lines here and there, going to have issues. So having this like flexible idea of ranked routes is it's too much chaos for me, Seth. I can't handle it.
I know. I really do. I think it would be an interesting exercise just to build that out a little bit. I mean, this could even be an example in their code review course, right? On like, what does rank actually mean and how can it fail? Because it's very similar to some of the other patterns and regular expression style routing that we've seen in the past, where a developer without, proper experience or taking proper precautions ends up opening up huge holes that were completely unintended.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, and refer to episode 2 for an example of after dark.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's see. That was a RC5. I did pop a. Yeah, if people are interested, you could go read that requests, the ranked routing in that requests guide, right? In Rocket's guide. But that being said, I do expect there to be more interesting stuff when we do the next After Dark episode, because we will start to do the source to sink tracing, the vulnerability checklists. I don't even think we really got into authentication, like registration flows or, a lot of that, because we were just trying to understand what the hell was going on, especially with ranked routing when we got stuck on that and went down the rabbit hole. So,
just trying to figure out like how routing is defined and nuances, and then like the authorization decorators, how they're defined and how they operate, and listing those all out, and just getting to know like how things are done. It took a lot of work because we've never seen that framework, and I've never really done much with Rust, so there's a lot to learn. Steep learning curve. But at least you know how to do it now if you watch that episode.
Yep, exactly.
Cool.
Good. So let's see. What else did we want to talk about today? We covered the trainings. Yeah.
Let's look at our news.
Yeah. Look at the news. Oh, actually, let's talk about, we neglected to mention that top 10 web hacking techniques of 2021. A few episodes ago, Ken and I talked about the nominee list that Portswigger had put out of the different top 10 techniques. And they have since released the list. Ken's dropping it up there. So I wanted to ask you, Ken, right? Like, just first glances, what those 10 are. What are your thoughts?
Oof.
Agree, disagree?
Now, what's the spirit of the top 10? I think that's one thing I don't really know. Is it just like these are just interesting, right? So hold on, let me look at the this is for research.
Yeah. It's to identify the most significant web security research released in the last year.
Okay. I don't know what the parameters for most significant really consist of, but in the spirit of just winging it. And so like, I think dependency confusion being number one makes a lot of sense. This is something, and actually there's an article I think we might get to today, maybe not, but about markers for potential to be compromised packages, but anyways, like this is actually a blah blah blah. So it's by Alex Bierson. I'm trying to open this link real quick.
You mean from the OAuth or from the top 10 there? I want to say OAuth top 10. That's how
yeah. No, so this is basically when this is the what am I trying to say here? Hold on, I'm trying to open the actual article, and for some reason I'm having some difficulty doing that. Is it loading for you?
It is. I know we
And we
like
talked about it. We had a whole
that.
episode on this.
Yeah, because
With,
we talked all about it, with how it was possible to basically overtake or use names of packages that were not um, registered in the public repositories, right? And then insert your code into those packages to take over CI/CD pipelines is really what it boils down to. So as those automated systems pull down packages, if they're set up to pull from a public repository first and then an internal repository, if the package name exists for a a custom package that's local to your company, but it tries to look that up in the public repository, it'll pull down whatever's first, right? And that's where we got some of the like package repository pinning and other things that were implemented in Ruby and other places, right? Like,
I was gonna say NPM, Ruby, a bunch of package managers put in some protections to prevent this. You're right. Yeah, I think that's what makes it an impactful bit of research, is that it did push out some changes to the ecosystem. And I think if you can impact one ecosystem alone, but let alone multiple, that's pretty significant. It's a good outcome.
Yeah.
I have no opinion on the new attack surface on Microsoft Exchange because I had never heard of that. That's honestly, being honest, that's just completely new to me. Flawless intro to Exchange's architecture and attack surface with reliable exploits and huge impact. Inspiring read if you want to start serious research, and a can of worms that changed the way many looked at this popular mailing solution and reminded us even the most secure looking apps can be broken easily if you're persistent, paying attention to all the details. Okay. I mean, I know opinion in there. HTTP2 being item number 2 makes sense. I mean, HTTP2 has been, pretty fun in terms of like, various things that are coming out of it. Request smuggling. This one was about, I think, converting between binary and ASCII protocols, fun stuff like that. Cool. I mean, that makes sense. Exploiting clients. So number 4, exploiting client-side prototype pollution in the wild. That makes sense. That's cool. Hidden OAuth attack vectors. So this is one that I think we talked about recently, where there was like this burp scanner, either last episode or the episode before, where there's now a burp plugin for Burp Suite that has like the top, it's like OAuth scan basically, and it just sort of like looks for the top OAuth issues that you'll see. And I think they listed something like 15 major issues in that plugin. Cache poisoning at scale. Again, cache poisoning, something we're very interested in. And like, that makes sense. JSON interoperability, practical HTTP smuggling. Fuzzing. I hate to say it, but I'm just so not interested in XSS anymore. I'm just so not interested in it. But it's cool. Fuzzing for XSS via nested parsers. I don't mean to be like, oh, this doesn't matter. Of course it matters. It definitely matters. I'm just saying, like, me personally, I'm a little XSS'd out.
Yeah, it's hard to get excited after 15 years of XSS, right?
And everybody has XSS. I mean, that's why you just put a content security policy in place. I'm not saying that's like, it pretty much does solve the majority of the issues you're going to come across if you do it right. But still, I mean, I don't know, man. Like if you have good CSP, you've done some intelligent design decisions with like how cookies are exchanged and configured, and to include your domain names and subdomain names and how you've configured things. Like if you've done it intelligently, I don't care as much about XSS anymore. But anyways.
I mean, the funny thing is, right, like a recent test that I did, we actually found stored cross-site scripting. Like, there was a component on the web pages that allowed for HTML, basically markup, right? You're designing your own page within the application. There's like your biography or whatever that you can write, and they would allow for, HTML elements within that. When they were actually, the form itself or the form control wouldn't allow for HTML characters, but then the second you sent it to the API on the back end, it did, and it would execute those. But it was only certain things, like script tags wouldn't work because they were adding it properly to the page. But image, like on errors, on mouse over events, all that kind of stuff worked like a champ, right?
Yeah.
And but that's just it, right? Like even nowadays with modern frameworks, you're going to find edge cases where XSS exists.
Sure.
And in this
It's
case,
just a
right?
hard problem to
Yeah,
completely
it,
solve. Yeah.
it is. And then we start talking to developers about it, and they're like, oh, is there, again, this is like a development 101, right? Is there a library that we could just put into place that'll take care of that for us? And I'm like,
CSP.
CSP, yes. Yep. There's CSP, but also like, can we just at least talk about what the problem is first, right? Like, like why is it that you have to accept HTML, characters on these forms? Because you don't, right? Like, it's just like,
nope, you sure don't.
yeah.
It's not mandatory or required at all. Yeah.
No, what is the business case behind this? Oh, it's because you want to be able to bold something, or I'm just like, I don't get it, right? So anyway, yeah.
By the way, I was gonna say, I don't know if I'm super familiar with the number 9, which is oh God, I can't talk. HTTP smuggling via higher HTTP versions. That one might actually be something I've not seen before. And I'm clicking on the link now because I'm curious. So yeah, that might actually be something new. Have you seen this?
I haven't looked at that one.
No. Emil Lerner. Well, they've got the slides link there. So yeah, I don't know. Like, this is not one I'm super familiar. Gained a lot of attention after James Kettle talk on attacker sends a malicious request is parsed as a single request by the front end and it's forwarded to the back end. Back end parses it as 2 separate. Well, I mean, this is one of the things we've been talking a lot about, is that we're having these mismatches in what one app sees versus another, versus like based on how they actually parse data. It's just becoming a more and more prevalent issue, and harder to detect statically and easier to detect manually. And obviously you and I tend to do more of the static analysis, but no AppSecker is complete without also knowing how to test dynamically. It's all about content. Yeah, well, I don't know. I have to read into this.
Yeah, because they've got like HA proxy, once they size. Yeah, quick. So HTTP3 flaws look very similar.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Again, it's parsing issues.
Yeah, it is parsing issues, right? Like it, and it's the implementation of the new protocols, right? Where we tend to have these problems. I don't know.
What are your thoughts on this top 10, by the way?
I dig the top 10 that come out of Portswigger. I like, at times it does feel like we've got like orange size stuff, right? It's super interesting. I don't know how much that actually moves the needle on some of the other techniques that are in there, right? Like the stuff with the dependency confusion, right? Like feels more impactful. Even though Microsoft Exchange, I know it's used everywhere. So like I kind of go back and forth, because it is that really a web security research vulnerability that's being pushed? But there's always going to be bias in any top 10 list, right? The guys that are creating the list have their favorites and actually have the stuff that's interesting to them, which rightfully so. They probably know Orange Sci. They probably read the articles and decided, hey, it spurred some thoughts for them, which is great, right? But then I also go back to like, okay, there's the OAuth top 10. Right. Again, they don't do that on a yearly basis. It's a different format. It's a awareness document of what can fail. So it's not as topical per se on a year-to-year basis on new security research that's up and coming. But obviously the request smuggling stuff is, it's been a couple of years now and it's still a topic for discussion, and we're still pushing the edge cases there. I was thinking that I was going to see more of like package management stuff, or because we did have the one dependency confusion, but I'm not seeing like or software supply chain attacks in here as much.
Yeah.
Which was surprising to me. I think that was the biggest omission that I found in there was, wow, we've had such a focus on, take over like malicious packages and NPM, and how that's actually driving application security, and yet it feels a little bit like it's missing from this list. Maybe it's not as interesting to this group, right? But to me it is. So I like that's the one that I would expect to see more of that isn't in there, right?
Yeah, sure. No, I agree with you. I am surprised as well. I mean, that was the biggest issue we've really faced in the last couple of years. I would say, at least as a blue teamer who has to constantly deal with like, oh, this is all jacked up now, and someone took over this, and someone gave access as a maintainer to somebody else who shouldn't have it, and account takeover sprees on maintainers, and just all the stuff that's really occurred. It's not been one type of attack. It's been many types of attacks on the supply chain. But the ultimate root cause is, ultimately what happens there in terms of as a result is malicious code running in a production application, and that's frightening. Of course.
Yep. Yeah. And that's a bad thing, right? And so like maybe it's because those techniques are already known, so it's not like a new vulnerability that's popping up, which is which kind of gets to my other point here was we didn't even see Log4j in there, right? Which I mean, it came out in December, so sure, that was probably like maybe that'll be the beginning for next year. But again, those like core fundamental crocs and socks of application security aren't always the most sexy, right? Like the most new security research always gets prevalence, or always gets priority over disciplined security, right?
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I mean,
yeah. So yeah. Anyway, I think in general, I think it's a good list. There's a lot that's in there to learn and actually read up on. So we'll probably do deeper dives on some of these articles that are interesting to us, especially if we haven't covered them so much in depth. A couple of those items we have talked about within the last year, but some of them are new, so it might be useful to actually dig in. Because I remember talking about the JSON interoperability stuff was interesting. But like some of those we may want to dig into a little bit more. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I would say if you're ever implementing OAuth, you should take a look at this hidden attack vector OAuth article that was linked from that top 10. Like, I do find OAuth is something that a lot of us, I mean, I definitely look at, and our team looks at a lot of OAuth related things. So it is good to have kind of a handy like hit list of things that are you should be concerned about, or that are possible to perform against some OAuth application. Yeah, you know what I'm trying to say. Man, I am really dragging today. This damn daylight savings time. I blame it all on daylight savings time, and definitely not on the fact that I stayed up way too late watching Dune because I couldn't sleep. So.
The 1984 version or the new one?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the new one. So, yeah.
Come on, Sting will always be my fade, Rafa.
Yeah. I mean, you had to be like what 30 when that movie came out. For those listening, Seth just gave me the middle finger, and it was deserved, for sure. Cool. Do we actually? I want to post real quick, just because we don't have to discuss it at ad nauseum. But let me grab this if Slack will allow me, I want to give the indicators of a potential for. There's this research. I just thought it was really cool that someone actually. Okay, yeah, I found it. So this is a data study that reveals predictor of supply chain attacks in NPM repositories. I just thought it was cool. Let me open that up. I read through this morning. Was just thought it was. It's mostly common sense stuff, I think, but it's interesting nonetheless. So, weak links in the NPM supply chain. So this is from security researchers and academia and industry are actively investigating attacks in ecosystems to propose solutions. These approaches seem to be based on specific instances of malicious attacks, typo squatting, dependency confusion, things like that, right? So getting to it. They found 6 key indicators that an NPM package may be compromised by malicious actors. 1, there were 2,818 maintainers whose domains had expired. An attacker can purchase an expired domain and use it to hijack the maintainer's account unless it's protected by 2-factor authentication. So once again, going back to our last episode when we gave guidance on guidance to package maintainers on how to secure themselves, that was kind of like the number one thing. Use 2FA, use an authenticator app, don't use SMS. Number 2, about 2% of the packages included install scripts. So included install scripts. Man, I cannot speak or read or apparently do anything. I'm blaming it all on daylight savings time. So. Anyways, yeah. Install scripts run automatically before, during, or after a package installation. Yeah. So this is definitely somewhere. Actually, we've struggled with this in our bug bounty program, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, it's definitely we've spent some time trying to find where the line is between, there's this idea of, well, if you're downloading a package, know that it is software from someone else. So there's some level of, risk that you're undertaking and all of that. But there's also this weird thing with install scripts where, if you just download it and it can do some pretty malicious things, then, that's starting to cross a boundary of like, how can we better secure the product for something like that? So there's always that weird line of figuring out what's your responsibility and what isn't. But in any case, install scripts are something, we're always conscious of, because it can kick off downloading, giving backdoors, downloading malicious things, all of that kind of stuff. Number 3, around 59% of the packages were unmaintained for 2 years. This is a big one. Like, if it has not been touched in 2 years or more, I would consider that package for sure at risk. Inactive maintainers might be targeted with account hijacking attacks without noticing. Yeah, absolutely. Number 4, a small percentage of the packages had too many maintainers, which increases the chance of at least one maintainer's account being compromised. I think this, Seth, falls under the principle of more attack surface. That's all it really is. Like, it's just each person that has access is one more addition to your attack surface.
Yep. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that part?
Oh yeah, it's I don't know, too many maintainers, right? Like we have a tendency, especially in the open source world, that we want to spread the love, right? Or we want to spread the responsibility. So it's not just us, because of the fact that people move on, like life gets busy, they stop maintaining packages. So their thought process behind it is, oh, if someone's interested, we're going to bring them on and, give them full control or give them access. And that's where we've seen a lot of those pop up in the past is, hey, you turn over a popular package to somebody you thought was going to be a great maintainer, but turned out to just have malicious intentions and wanted to take over a popular package, right? It does not help. Yeah, exactly. And that feeds into number 5 as well, right? Too many contributors. The more active that a project is, the more churn that it actually has. If there is only a small group that's doing trusted changes, it's going to be a problem, right? Like, because I mean, in general, right? You think about getting overwhelmed, think about how you're tired because of daylight savings time. Now would be the perfect point to fish Ken, right? To send him a
Don't
whole bunch
fish
of
me.
links, make him, his email is, no, just kidding.
Yeah,
But
it's out there.
yeah, I mean, the busier that you get, the less time that you have to spend on each of these different, items, and the less attention that it's going to get when the new package or the new code comes in. And Charles, yeah, I can totally see that in the FreeBSD world, right? It's not as busy of an ecosystem as some of the others. So especially like the unmaintained packages or packages that haven't been updated for a couple of years to keep up. Yeah, somebody takes it over, does malicious stuff with it. Like the control becomes a huge issue. And then what was number 6 there? Oh, yeah, that feeds right into it, right?
Yep.
Top 1% maintainers are overloaded, owned an average of 180 packages. And I did want to bring this up. I always love to bring up, like when I'm training and talking about open source packages and just in general, like, security, like security configurations. Oh, excuse me. Modulecounts.com actually just does a monitoring of the different modules in different languages and package managers, right? NPM average growth in the last week, 192 packages a day.
Man, they're beating everybody by a lot.
1,000, yeah, not 100, 1,092, right? Like by 10 times. 5 to 10 times more than anything else. Java is the closest other one at 200 a day, 221 a day. Java and Python are pretty close there, but NPM is just insane. The number of packages that are being pushed in there on a daily basis, and not just like the fact. The problem that I've got here is that it's new packages, right? It's not just, hey, old packages that are being updated, popular packages that are being updated or, withdrawn or whatever. This is new packages being added to the repository. And I always went back to, the Node security project, Lift Security days, when Adam and his team were trying to secure NPM all by themselves. And there was 3 or 4 of them. And at that time there was 600, 700 new packages a day. And I like, this is the problem that you are facing over there, taking over.
I'm laughing because I'm like literally in the process of reviewing
1,000 packages a day. Yeah.
No, but maybe NPM infrastructure and apps, but whatever. Yeah, actually, this is my life right now. So, and I don't know how much I'm allowed to even say about it, but yeah, I'm dealing with. So I feel Adam's. I feel a bit of pain. I don't want to say pain, but I mean in terms of like the responsibility, I feel a little bit of that for sure. So, but no, we've actually. I mean, here's the thing: we do actually have for NPM folks, like we've got some really, really great people working on that team. And again, I don't even know if I'm allowed to call them out individually or anything like that. So I'll just say that I'd love to, but we've got some really sharp folks that are doing some really cool things to prevent account takeovers and, just improve some things around accounts, we'll say. So I'm and also just like general effort to, because of like you mentioned, the level of activity that ecosystem sees is just trying to do more to keep it secure. So just because like this is always going to be the case, right? If you're doing really well, you're going to be a target.
Yep.
Just the way it works. So nobody wants to target the package ecosystem that's putting out like, 10 packages a month or whatever, nobody cares. But if you're doing it, daily, pushing out new packages in the 4-figure range or more, then that's pretty significant. So,
yep.
And that's where NPM lives right now.
Yep, exactly. Well, I mean, that's the interesting thing, right? Like, I know NPM has put a lot into that. And so I start to wonder, okay, as there's more scrutiny that's pushed onto NPM, are you going to see more people attacking like the PyPI, like the Python package manager, or crates like Rust. Some of those that maybe are not quite as scrutinized, and don't have as many eyes on them, because it isn't as large of an install base. I don't know though, right? Like that's
So I can say,
How much can you say?
I don't know. Crates is an interesting one that you brought up, because I know of a few package maintainers of the package manager ecosystems themselves, like crates and npm, and I know that there are folks who are talking to each other about how, I know that they're like similar to how, I had mentioned on this podcast, and I'll mention it again once we actually have the locked in information. Like we do this AppSec council where it's like similar technology companies, and we've got AppSec folks from each one of, like, like the event's going to be with, I can mention one of them, with like Netflix, right? One of the because it's primarily driven by this event, primarily driven by Netflix. I can definitely mention them as a company. But we get this AppSec council, and they're doing something similar for package basically communicating amongst these package manager ecosystem maintainers is what I'm trying to say. So they are doing their own, like, sort of what are you doing? Here's what we're planning on doing, kind of communicating out how they're preventing risks. So that was the news to me as of like I think last week or the week before, and that was very promising to hear. So I was like, that's amazing. I am privy to some information like that, and that's one thing I feel comfortable sharing. Is that they are all communicating together, or several of the big ones, or any and newer ones are communicating and learning from the bigger ecosystems that have been around for a bit.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it's good. That's what we would expect to see, right? Like everyone's helping everyone else out. But it's just a huge target, right? Like it goes back to a watering hole attack, right? That's like, we've always said this, right? Like if you go back to my early days where we had names for vulnerabilities that no one uses anymore. But the watering hole attack is the idea that, like, if I can poison the water hole that the developers come to, I don't have to go target each of the developers separately, right?
Yeah.
And that's the idea here. It's why we target IDEs. It's why, attackers target tools as opposed to, phishing users. It's why GitHub is a target, or, as opposed to, their website, or, some small repository that they've set up by themselves. It's good. Like it's a wider effect, right?
For sure.
Same reason why people build malware for Windows over Mac OS. There's just a larger target. So
my son asked me about that recently. He was like, so are Macs more secure? And I was like, oh, don't ask me. Like, you don't understand that question enough. Like, hold on, wait, we gotta, like, there's a whole, I was like, let me get my whiteboard out and we'll have a discussion. I gotta preface this conversation with all this information.
I'm gonna kill security for you right now. Yeah. At age 9.
I just see my wife's just eyes rolling and just wanting to walk away from. I was like, oh, I'm glad you asked. No. Yeah, no. Actually, I did actually start doing lock picking with him.
Nice.
I think it was last week. We got one of those clear, starter learn how to pick lock sets off like Amazon or something. So like he was surprised at how easy it is to unlock some of these locks. And I was like, yeah, that's the world in a nutshell. That's why we do what we do. You'd be surprised how easy these locks are, like metaphorically and
yes.
literally
and physically. Yes.
And physically how locks are, how you would expect something to be secure and it's not, So yeah, and like dashing his dreams and creating a cynical 9-year-old. So
there you go.
just joking.
Ruining life for the next generation.
Stefan level nihilism to a 9-year-old. Yeah.
Yes.
No biggie.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to be teaching him like some Slavic languages next, and
I know,
then
right?
it's all over, right?
You can't trust the system. Adults are idiots. Security is like, is an illusion. Yeah.
Oh, speaking of which,
Parenting
not
101.
trusting. No. We have an article related to that, right? Here, we'll throw this one in here.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Good segue. See, that was on
Good
purpose.
segue. Yes, it was on purpose. So because of everything that's going on, and this pulls me back to the the 90s, and export encryption export rules that happened, that we weren't allowed to actually send AES encryption routines to anywhere outside the US, that they wanted everything as triple DES so that they could continue to break it, that the government could. But this in and of itself is pretty chilling, right? The fact that Russia is now issuing its own TLS certificates.
Yes.
Yeah.
That doesn't worry me at all.
Yeah. What was he said? Full trust in the government. That never goes poorly, right?
Yeah. No, never a problem. Yeah. But no, that's really, it's crazy, man. It's crazy. They got kicked off. Like, it's not something I had thought about. You hear about, all right, well, you're taking off the Swift registry or the Swift system, and you can't be a part of the world's financial system. And they're about to default on I don't know, like $112 million payment or something like that. You hear all these things and you kind of think about that. But man, I had never really thought about oh, we're not supporting you as a certificate authority, making it worse for the citizens of that country, especially. I mean, dude, imagine trying to have any form of online dissent when your government's
when it's all plain text.
CA certs. I'm sorry to laugh, but it's just so shitty. It's so terrible. And I hadn't thought about that, until this article. Make sure you use the Yandex browser that trusts the new Russian CA. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So you might want to check Chrome and Safari, make sure we're not trusting those certs, right? But and I don't think they will, in general, but other regimes have done this in the past, right? And it is very much an information control and being able to see what people are saying, even outside of public news channels and other things. It's pretty chilling.
What do you think the odds are that's going to go backwards once this conflict is over?
Oh, it won't, right? Once it's out, right? And once they have, when has the government ever voluntarily given up control, right?
No, it's
historically,
right?
Historically, it takes.
You mean people who crave power and get power don't want to give away power once they got the power?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. I don't get it.
Human nature and history has taught us otherwise.
Once again, I'm sorry for my 9-year-old. You're going to be way too cynical, way too early in life. Poor guy. No, but it's super weird, super odd to see a self-signed certificate. But again, it's an interesting byproduct of this whole thing, and tech companies, effectively just pulling out of doing anything for Russia and being, a provider in any way for Russia. So it's pretty interesting stuff there, but also a little scary.
I mean, along those lines though, as well, you've seen VPN traffic increases from Russia increase by tens of thousands of %, right? Because of that, as it's going on. They said somewhere that just the banning of Meta, right? So Facebook and Instagram in Russia caused an increase in VPN traffic of 2,000%, 2,000% coming out of those countries.
Interesting. Do you think that's a platform used for communicating? I would imagine it's not because people are trying to, you know, they're not like, they're not posting like everything like you would normally, right? Like, oh, here's my food, or, I don't know, I went to this event, or I don't know. It's probably more about like communicating and what am I trying to say? Strategizing and logistics and stuff like that, communicating stuff like that, I'd imagine.
Well, I mean, I think that's it. I think it's also news, right? Like being able to see what the world is seeing as opposed to just what's being broadcast on state-run media, right? Like, there's alternate news sources that get pushed through those channels, through those social media sites. So there's that. I also think like I've seen some activity around people that like were like that were like Instagram, leaders, whatever you want to call them, right? Like, social media, personalities that basically have now lost their job because they can't post anymore, right? Like
I saw that.
Yeah.
I heard about that rather.
I think it's a combination of both, but like just 2,000% is pretty huge, right? From a VPN perspective. It'd be interesting to watch what those stats are at each of the, the VPN providers, and like what the capacity is coming out of those endpoints as opposed to, other places, and what it was 2 months ago. Yeah.
One other thing I think that one other angle to this that we haven't really talked about yet is that Russia is allegedly, they're allegedly spreading they're fake fact checking is what I'm trying to say. They're fake fact checking Ukrainian news sources and debunking as misinformation or disinformation, depending on the context and the storyline or whatever, or like in the news. And what they're doing is they're like I said, they're doing fake fact checking. And when you cut off this article states, 140 million people. So if you cut off 140 million people from being able to, and they're calling it the digital iron curtain. I like that. That's what I'll call it. So when you use a digital iron curtain to cut off 140 million people from news sources, and you control the news, and you're the one saying what's information, disinformation, misinformation, you become the sole arbiter of the truth. And at least, assuming people haven't found clever ways to get around these things, and I'm sure they have. And awesome. But in any case, it's probably a small minority of people who have the ability to actually access truthful information at that point. And the vast majority, maybe are not that tech savvy and so are limited to, like I said, they're the arbiter of truth there, the Russian government. Yep. So there's that added element to it. And it's, to me, it seems like a very, these things all seem like a pretty coordinated, pretty strategic set of decisions. And it's interesting to see how the cyber landscape is shaping, is having a big impact on this conflict. It's just,
it definitely is. Yeah.
Two worlds colliding, digital and physical.
Yep. Yeah. I don't know, the information warfare that's going on, right? Like the propaganda that's coming out on both sides is really quite interesting to see. I mean, we've always had information warfare going on during conflicts, and now it's just extended out into the cyber realm more and more, as well as the attacks that are going on there. I mean, I'm still seeing articles about the IT Army and the cyber warfare that's going on, and Anonymous that's, targeting, Russian installations and military and other things. So that's going back and forth in the background as well. It doesn't get as much play as, the physical efforts and the physical conflicts that's going on, rightfully so, right? Like when there's real death and, other, bullets that are flying back and forth. That's probably where the focus should be. But it'll be interesting to see in 10 years what the research is coming out of this first real cyber war that's going on, right? Full scale. Because and there's stuff that's going down on both sides. I don't know how much instability it's introduced from a application security perspective. You're running an app for a company, or you're trying to secure your own products. How much more do you need to think about availability in that CIA triad than you did 2 months ago, right? Distributed denial of service attacks have increased. How do you prevent that? Are you using Cloudflare or something else to help mitigate it? Like how much can you actually take without shutting down?
I think Israel just dealt with a huge DDoS attack, and it's all these not little attacks, pretty significant attacks, all kind of. There's so many of them. Like if you look at the security news right now, there's so many of them. It's actually like not even. Like, where would we begin? We'd have to start every episode going through a laundry list of places that have had some serious. It used to be you and I, when there was like a serious exploit or serious, we would talk about it. But these days, it's like right now, there's too many attacks that have gone on. That's like one, when you said DDoS, it made me think of the recent Israel DDoS. But yeah, I mean, it's like literally every day there's multiple big breaches, attacks going on. It's hard to even keep up with. I mean,
well, that's where I'm going with the research aspect, right? We don't fully understand all the attacks that are happening, why they're being successful. If some of these players are pulling out custom exploits, custom code, like stuff that they've kept in their back pocket for the past couple of years right now because it's the time to use it. And it's hidden inside of all of the breaches, inside all of the DDoS attacks that are going on. And so things like even this article coming out of China, that they are like starting to observe all that traffic, that they're issuing their own TLS certificates, that has a significant impact on the privacy of hundreds of millions of people. And yet, that's the first article that I've seen on it. And it's it feels pretty small in comparison to everything else that's going on, but it has a very significant risk moving forward to stability and to privacy for everyone, not just a couple hundred million people that it directly affects.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know. Like it's becoming a nihilist episode, a bitch and nihilism episode, apparently, Ken, but
no, I think we're living through an interesting time in history. I'm about sick of living through interesting times in history, but we are. And as cybersecurity practitioner, I hate that, by the way, that term, cybersecurity. Have you ever liked that term?
No.
Because whenever people ask me what I do, because you and I, we started early on. Before this was, I mean, I wasn't even, when I was hacking on things, there wasn't even a profession for this. You were just a criminal, basically. So, I mean, same for you, I'm sure. So it's like, all right, well,
No, how old are you? Gosh, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I know. Yeah. So, when people, they ask like inevitably, like, what do you do or whatever, right? I'm always like, a lot of times now I just say I'm like a hacker or whatever, but or I work in software security. But like people will always be like, oh, so you work in cybersecurity, right? And I'm like, just don't ever say that to me, please. Like, I hate that term. It's like you and Jots. Like, I just don't like the name cyber security. It's just
cyber
lame. Or infosec.
Infosec. Yeah,
I work in application security.
But if you say application security to the layman,
then it's just a glazed over look. I have no idea.
I'm like, I teach developers how not to get hacked. Yeah, that's the go-to, right?
I just tell people I look for vulnerabilities in code, as a description. And so then it comes back to, so you're in cybersecurity, huh? Yep. Don't know why I hate it so much, but I just cannot stand that term.
So I'm going to label this episode 165 cybersecurity kid.
I don't even know how I got off on that tangent, but yeah, anyways, I just don't like the term. seems so lame and artificial and invented. And yeah, anyway, I mean, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. IT
Contrived is the word I was looking for.
janitor.
IT
There we
janitor. Yeah,
go.
that's honestly.
Yes,
I think you also glorified QA. I think that's also
glorified QA
applicable.
tester. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I do QA just poorly. I don't document well.
I'm a Unix guy who loves computers.
That
Yes,
works too.
exactly. Yes, that's a
Unix,
good one.
Linux, yes, yeah. Except, yeah, I mean, nowadays Unix, people would probably recognize that term at least a little bit more. Back when I started, I said Unix, and they looked at me like I was, nuts. So because that's the only thing that could be described as a eunuch, right? Like, yeah, you're what now?
Yeah, I remember there was a point where people, when they'd ask you, like, "Oh, what operating system?" You're like Linux or Unix. I remember this. There were people just look at you like, "Oh, so you live in your mom's basement? Cool,
Yeah,
sounds
yeah,
good." Like, how's that neck beard coming? Yeah, now it's like very normal, very like I have friends that aren't even like in IT that run Linux, Unix, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's cool. I installed it because it was fun and try something
yep.
different." Cool.
It's okay.
Awesome.
All right. Well, we've been all over the map today. We didn't
really
get to the end of passwords. We'll do that next week. We'll talk about passwords and how they will be no more. Not really.
We need to talk about
yes.
WebAuthn a bit too. On that note, that's a
Yeah.
topic that we had. I probably a year and a half ago, maybe even 2 years ago. We were like, I know I said it. I think we both said it. Like we should talk about WebAuthn, and we just haven't. So
Yeah. WebAuthn would be a good one. We could do a walkthrough on that because there's a lot of good stuff that's out there on it. Passwords in general. I don't want to dive into it too much because I have a differing opinion, right? Like I know we've got this whole like push to, we're going to get rid of passwords. And I was going to show a list of like, you can Google end of passwords. And, they've been saying it for 20 years, right? Like, we're not going to have to use passwords anymore, but we'll get into that at a later date. But WebAuthn would be good. I want to talk more about Web3 stuff too at some point, Ken.
yeah, yes,
There's a lot going on there. I'm doing some reviews of different blockchain coins and dexes and things like that, and it's spurred a lot of thoughts that I would like to discuss at some point, right? Because it's the distributed nature of Web3, like what they're promising. I mean, it's fascinating to me, but it also gives me like pause because there's huge concerns related to it, especially in the normal paradigm of, the CIA triad, the AAA, like just normal security principles. Blockchain is it's not a magic bullet for solving security problems. We've already seen that, and so like anyone assuming that we're not going to have cross-site scripting because we're on blockchain is yeah. Anyway, so we have topics that are up and coming. We'll decide on one next week, and maybe we'll socialize it a little bit, put it out, see if people have questions on it. I think WebAuthn and passwords is probably a great place to start, and then we can do a little research on the Web3 stuff for an upcoming episode as well.
Yeah, and I know we have a couple guests too who you're lining up too. So we'll have to kind of chop it up and figure it out. So like maybe 1 week will be one piece of the topics we discussed just now, and then maybe a guest the next. We'll figure it out. But we've got a lot. This year should be fun. So we've got a lot going on. We're back to traveling. I figure while we're at Local Mocosec, we can definitely do some podcasting, interviewing of folks. We're going to have like access to some really great minds within product security, the product security field. So I think, expect some shows too while we're on the road. So it's going to be a more fun year than the last, in terms of like travel and meeting people and stuff like that. It's probably a little bit more active than the last couple of years. So definitely psyched.
Yeah. Yep. It's a good year. It's going to be fun. So great. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. Everything's not the worst, right? Just some things are. So yeah. we'll catch everybody online. Join us on, Twitter or Slack or whatever else if you have more that you want to talk about. But we appreciate the views and we appreciate the interaction. So
Absolutely.
thanks for being with us today. Catch everybody next week.